we're going to begin. If you can grab your hymnal. For those of you in the front, it should be between your legs.
We have an extra one. It's up high.
Okay, and let's turn to page 88. 88. So we're going to begin this afternoon with the oldest hymn or carol that we're going to look at today, O Come, Emmanuel. This dates back over 1,200 years and was naturally written in the language of the church back then, Latin. This hymn would have been sung in monasteries beginning 7 days before Christmas Eve. So if you look at the text on page 88, you're going to notice that each verse begins with the word O. Yeah? And so these are collectively known as the O antiphons. And so a lot of times in Episcopal churches, you will have like a concert called the O antiphons, and they have anthems based on each one of these phrases. So a different verse of this hymn would be sung each day in the following order, beginning 7 days before Christmas Eve. So on the 17th, you would have O Wisdom. On the 18th, O Lord. 19th, O Root of Jesse. On the 20th, O Key of David. On the 21st, O Dayspring. On the 22nd, O King of Nations. And then on the 23rd, O With Us is God. So I've written up here the Latin translation. And something very interesting. This is like something out of the Da Vinci Code or, Dan Brown. If you look at the first letters of each of those, they form a Latin acrostic or a word puzzle. Arrow, cross, means tomorrow I will be there. That's the translation in Latin. The hymn gained widespread popularity in the Protestant church when in 1851, John Mason Neale included it in the hymnal entitled Medieval Hymns and Sequences. Speaking of hymnals, there are two ways that hymnals treat this hymn. In some hymnals, it's a very metered treatment. That's kind of the Protestantization of it. But in our hymnal, you'll notice that there aren't bar lines. It's not metered. So this was a choice by the hymnal committee to kind of return it to how it would have been sung in a monastery. And so much closer to what would have been sung back then. So what we're going to do, we're going to sing verse 1, and then we're going to sing 6 and 7. Why are we doing this? Because normally, when we sing it in Advent, I wouldn't dare program 7 verses of a hymn. Yeah, there would be revolt. So we're going to sing 6 and 7, which we've probably never sung before. We normally go 1 through 4. Okay? So this is 1, 6, 7. verse 6. Okay. Let's jump over to 145. What Child Is This was written by William Chatterton Dix, an Englishman who lived from 1837 to 1898. He was born in Bristol, England, but he spent much of his life in Glasgow. At the age of 29, William was struck down with an illness that very nearly killed him. While he did survive the sickness, he was confined to his bed for several months. Doesn't sound so bad. These months in bed caused him to fall into a deep depression. However, this time also resulted in a sort of spiritual reawakening. This is how you know this was before Netflix. He spent hours each day reading his Bible, and during this period, he wrote the hymn, Alleluia, Sing to Jesus, As with the Gladness, Men of Old, and What Child Is This? The words of this hymn are set to the tune Greensleeves. And you may have heard this myth before, that Henry VIII wrote it to impress Anne Boleyn. Some people attribute Henry VIII as actually writing Greensleeves. However, we can now pretty much say that did not happen, based on the compositional techniques. They think it's Elizabethan era, so later. And also interesting, although the tune and the text come from England, it's far more popular in the United States and not really sung in England. So let's sing 145. Let's do 1 and 3. 1 and 3. Okay. So now we want to turn to 122. 122. In 1816, a young Austrian priest, Father Joseph Mohr, wrote the words to a hymn that 200 years later, I can almost guarantee is sung at every Christmas Eve service. 2 years later, in 1818, Silent Night had its first performance, fittingly, at the Church of St. Nicholas in Oberndorf on Christmas Eve. The writing of the tune was born out of necessity. The church organ was put out of commission due to a flooding from a nearby river. So Father Mohr asked that Franz Gruber, a local schoolmaster and organist, to compose a tune that could be accompanied by the guitar. Over the years, Gruber's name was forgotten, and the tune was attributed to composers such as Haydn, Mozart, or Beethoven. However, in 1995, a manuscript bearing Gruber's name, dating back to 1820, was found, confirming that he did indeed write the tune. So my favorite story associated with this carol is the story of the so-called Christmas truce. On Christmas Eve 1914, in the midst of fighting on the Western Front, British soldiers on one side of the World War I battlefield and Germans on the other side put down their weapons for one evening, calling off their fighting. In his book, Silent Night, the story of the World War I Christmas truce, author Stanley Weintraub states, "It was impromptu. No one planned it. It has to begin with something, and it begins with an element of shared culture. If it hadn't been for shared culture, certainly there would have been no Christmas truce." Weintraub goes on to say, "It started with German officer Walter Kirchhoff, a tenor with the Berlin Opera. He came forward and sang Silent Night in German, and then in English. In the clear, cold night of Christmas Eve, his voice carried far. The shooting had stopped, and in that silence he sang, and the British knew the song and sang it back. Gradually the troops crawled forward into no man's land," said Weintraub. "The song had a deep impact on many of the soldiers. Soldiers wrote home the day after to their families, to their wives, and to their parents saying, 'You won't believe this. It was like a waking dream.' They recognized that on both sides of the rifle, they were the same." So we're going to have Laura sing verse 1 in German, and then we're going to join on verses 2 through 4. Yeah, if you can do that, I've got an extra slice of cake for you. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go to 123.
I have a quick question. So for Silent Night, the first time it was played for a congregation, it was accompanied by the guitar
Yeah,
and not an organ.
it's a shame, but yes. Yeah. The question was, so the first time it was played in a church service was accompanied by a guitar, not the organ. And unfortunately, yes. So the text to It Came Upon a Midnight Clear was written in 1849 by a Unitarian pastor by the name of Edmund Sears. He began his ministry at a small Unitarian church in Wayland, Massachusetts. He would then move on to the First Church of Christ Unitarian in Lancaster, Massachusetts, also known as the Bulfinch Church, which is still there, you can see it. However, the stresses of this much larger church got to him, and after 7 years, he had a mental breakdown and returned to Wayland. The combination of his poor mental health and being severely affected by the Mexican-American War caused Sears to write this hymn that actually doesn't really focus on the Christmas story that much. The it found in the line, "It came upon midnight clear," it's not referring to the birth of Jesus, but rather to the song sung by the angels proclaiming peace on earth. Sears' turmoil over the Mexican-American War is clearly on the forefront of his mind as he was writing this hymn. So as we sing it, notice all the references to the turmoil of the world and desire for peace. You have lines such as, "Yet with the woes of sin and strife, the world has suffered long." And verse 4, which states, "And you beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow." So just notice it's a little bit of a different context when you know the background. So we're going to sing, we'll do verses, how many verses are there? 5. No way. We'll do 1, 4, and 5. Okay. Verse 4. Okay, let's go to 121. O Little Town of Bethlehem was written in 1868 by Phillips Brooks for the Sunday school children of Holy Trinity Episcopal in Philadelphia, where he was the rector or the pastor. Phillips wrote the text following a pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 1865. On Christmas Eve, he traveled from Jerusalem to Bethlehem by horseback. The following are his words. Before dark, we rode out of town to the field where they say the shepherds saw the star. It is a fenced piece of ground with a cave in it, in which, strangely enough, they put the shepherds. Somewhere in those fields, we rode through where the shepherds must have been. As we passed, the shepherds were still keeping watch over their flock, or leading them home to fold. So that evening, he participated in a service at the ancient basilica said to be built over the site of the Nativity, a service that started at 10 p.m. and ended at 3 a.m. So the next time on Communion Sunday, we go to 11:05. Think about that. Laura is now going to sing a verse of the hymn that you've probably never heard before. This verse was omitted because it references the Son of the Undefiled. And being good Protestants, they thought that was too close to the Catholic theology of the Immaculate Conception of Mary. So this doesn't appear. So this is a verse you've probably never heard before. The tune was written by Lewis Henry Redner. Redner was something of a rock star in the Sunday school field. Because when he arrived at Holy Trinity, the Sunday school numbered 36 children. He built up the Sunday school to over 1,000 children. Let it happen here. Redner noted that the simple music was written in great haste and under the great pressure, almost on the eve of Christmas. It was right after midnight that a little angel whispered the strain in my ear, and I roused myself and jotted it down as you have it. In England, the same tune is, or the same text is usually sung to the tune called Forest Green, composed by Ralph Vaughan Williams. Laura is going to sing verse 1 of O Little Town of Bethlehem to the British tune, and then we are going to do verses 2 through 4 of our tune. Yeah. This is verse 2. 1, 2, 3. Does anybody prefer the British? Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
Now, the British one is Forest Green.
Which, yeah. I guess that angel should have whispered a different tune. than-
I don't know. He's the author, but I mean, was he a Sunday school teacher or preacher?
He was Phillips Brooke, he was the rector, the pastor of Holy Trinity Episcopal in Philadelphia. And then the Sunday school superintendent or CE director wrote the tune. This next one is not in your hymnal, O Holy Night. And I just want to preface, this little description I'm reading, this was by Anne Gabhart and her blog on him, so I'm stealing her material, but I'm citing her. It seems that back in 1847, in a small French town, a man named Placide Cappeau was known more for his talents at writing poetry than for his faithfulness in church attendance. He might not be the first person one would suspect a priest would seek out to write a poem for Christmas Mass. But the priest did ask him, and the man took his request seriously. Placide Cappeau began thinking about the birth of Jesus. With that inspiration, he wrote O Holy Night. Placide was so pleased with how the poem came out that he decided it needed to be a song. Since he was a poet but not a musician, he turned to a friend, Adolphe Charles Adams, to see if he would set his poem to music. Adolphe was a famous classical musician who had composed many works all around the world, but he agreed to come up with music for his friend's poem. The interesting thing was that Adolphe was a Jewish man who didn't celebrate the birth of Jesus. Even so, he did compose music to go with the beautiful words, and the song was performed only a few weeks later at a midnight mass on Christmas Eve. O Holy Night became popular in France and was sung in many Christmas services. But when Placide completely left the church to join a socialist movement, and it was discovered that Adolphe was Jewish, the French Catholic Church leaders decided that O Holy Night was unfit for church services because of its lack of musical taste and total absence of the spirit of religion. Even though the church no longer allowed the song in services, the French people continued to sing it. A decade later, an American writer, John Sullivan, saw something in the song that moved him beyond the story of the birth of Christ. An abolitionist, Dwight strongly identified with the lines of the third verse. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. This verse mirrored Dwight's view of slavery in the South. He published his English translation of O Holy Night in his magazine, and the song quickly found favor in America, especially in the North during the Civil War. Back in France, the song continued to be banned by the church for almost 2 decades, while the people still sang O Holy Night at home. Legend has it that on Christmas Eve, 1871, in the midst of fierce fighting between the armies of Germany and France during the Franco-Prussian War, a French soldier suddenly jumped out of his muddy trench. Both sides stared at the seemingly crazed man who lifted his eyes to the heavens and began singing O Holy Night. Then a German soldier stepped into the open and answered the Frenchman's song with Martin Luther's From Heaven Above to Earth I Come. The story goes that the fighting stopped for the next 24 hours while the men on both sides observed a temporary peace in honor of the Christmas day. Perhaps this story had a part in the French church once again embracing O Holy Night in holiday services. So Laura's going to sing verses 1 and 3 of O Holy Night. It's not a particularly easy song for a congregation to sing. It is in some hymnals, but
I think they really did have to decide some things had to or not be there.
yeah.
Too, they were really had a hard time choosing things.
Let's look at 134. Joy to the World was written in 1719 by Isaac Watts. Watts is known as the godfather of English hymnody. Watts wrote so many of the hymns we love. My shepherd will supply my need. I sing the mighty power of God. When I survey the wondrous cross, O God, our help in ages past, Jesus shall reign wherever the sun. Watts didn't write Joy to the World as a Christmas carol. If you read over the text, again, it doesn't necessarily have that much to do with Christmas. The coming of the Lord referred to is actually that of Jesus' second coming to earth. The tune to Joy to the World was written by Lowell Mason, who is another one of the giants in the hymn writing world. Most famously, he composed the music to Nearer My God to Thee. The tune is often attributed to Handel, however. It is probably more accurate to say that there are coincidental similarities to music composed by Handel. The first four notes of Joy to the World are identical to the first four notes of Lift Up Your Heads from Messiah. But as you think about it, it's not that original, so, and, you know. However, Lowell Mason was a great admirer of Handel and was the president of the Boston Handel and Haydn Society. Fun fact, Joy to the World holds the distinction of being the most published Christmas hymn in North America. Let's do... Let's do 1, 3, 4. Okay. This next one's not in your hymnal. Good King Wenceslas. Who is Good King Wenceslas? Wenceslas was actually, his title was Wenceslas I, Duke of Bohemia, and he lived from 907 to 935. Wenceslas did not come from a long line of Christians. In fact, his grandfather had been converted to Christianity by Saints Cyril and Methodius, and his mother was the daughter of a pagan tribal chief. Wenceslas' father died when Wenceslas was quite young, and so there was a struggle to determine who would be the next ruler. Wenceslas' grandmother was executed, and his mother was banished from Bohemia. Eventually, after a lot of fighting, the people of Bohemia settled on Wenceslaus as their next ruler. Being too young to actually rule, however, his mother was made regent. When Wenceslaus turned 18 and became in charge entirely, one of his first acts was to banish his mother from the region. So, thanks, Mom. Things in the kingdom were still a little unstable, so it was divided into two, with Wenceslaus ruling one part and his brother Boleslaus ruling the other. This arrangement didn't last too long. Boleslaus plotted to take out his brother. On September 28th, 935, great Christmas story, 3 noblemen stabbed Wenceslaus, and then his brother, now known as Boleslaus the Cruel, ran through him with a lance.
Oh my goodness.
Almost immediately, Wenceslaus was regarded as a martyr and a saint. One 12th century priest said to his congregation, "His deeds I think you know better than I could tell you, for as is read in his passion, no one doubts that, rising every night from his noble bed, with bare feet and only one chamberlain, he went around to God's churches and gave alms generously to widows, orphans, and those in prison and afflicted by every difficulty. His remains are in the cathedral in Prague, and his saint's day is a public holiday in the Czech Republic." There is a legend that the statue of Saint Wenceslaus in Wenceslaus Square in Prague, if there's ever any trouble, the statue will animate itself and rise up an army to defend. Okay. So Laura is going to sing Good King Wenceslas. Okay. That's his, the 26th of December. Yeah. I mean, anything's a drinking song if you're thirsty enough. Our last one, 144. 144. And again, I want to cite, this comes from the United Methodist History of Hymns, so I'm reading from that.
Oh, I love this one.
Christina Rossetti gives us one of the most beloved Christmas hymns. The author of 3 collections of mostly religious poetry and 4 devotional books, she came from a family steeped in the arts. Her deep faith is thought to be partially the result of the solace that she found in writing as a result of her poor health from age 16. Christina's father, Gabriele Rossetti, was a professor of Italian at King's College London, living in exile in England. Her brothers, Dante and William, gave birth to a 19th century art movement, the Pre-Raphaelites, for which Christina often served as a model, especially for portraits of the Madonna. Among the family friends was Charles Dodgson, who, under the pseudonym of Lewis Carroll, authored Alice in Wonderland. An ardent Anglican, Christina rejected one suitor because he was Roman Catholic. Those were the days. So this first appeared in 1872 and was paired to a tune by the composer Gustav Holst. In the first memorable stanza, Rossetti creates a dreary and desolate image of the world into which the infant Jesus appeared by drawing on the experience of a British winter. She is not suggesting that it is literally snowed in Bethlehem, but is drawing on a long-established literary idea of associating snow with Christ's birth. The famous 17th century poet John Milton used the winter imagery in his poem On the Morning of Christ's Nativity as a pure covering to hide the sin of the world. Rossetti exploits the metaphor in the opposite way in her opening stanza. The incarnate one, the light of the world, brought warmth into the most forlorn and dreary of sinful situations. The second stanza uses a device to make the point that the eternal one, whom heaven could not hold, nor earth sustain, appeared during the bleak winter of human existence, where a stable place sufficed. This paradox of the eternal one born in a humble setting is a primary theme of many hymns of this season. The final stanza is perhaps one of the most endearing to singers of Christmas hymns. Yet, as British hymnologist J.R. Watson observes, the final verse is a strangely interesting one. Watson cites an article by British hymn writer Elizabeth Cosnett, who provides a social commentary that may shed light on this stanza. She notes that when a woman wrote these words, women were largely excluded from the professions and from higher education. Like the shepherds, she was not employed. Like the wise men, Rossetti held no degree. Watson concludes that this reading of the final stanza does not invalidate the more general reading of the verse, but it gives a special sharpness and poignancy to the last verse for those who wish to find it. The writer invites us to offer our own gift to the Christ child, just as the shepherds and wise men did. Rather than the present of a lamb or expensive gift, however, we must offer the most important gift, our hearts. So let's sing verse 1, 3, and 4. Verse 3. So hopefully, when we sing these Christmas carols in a few days, you'll have a little deeper appreciation. I want to thank Laura for singing so beautifully. And thank you.